Imagination is the one thing that human beings have that is the most powerful thing we have. It's more powerful than any kind of military strength or economic strength. You can't, it is stronger than any of those things, but it's not valued that way.
Hi, my name is Katja Vogt and I teach philosophy at Columbia University.
Hi, my name is Jens Haas and I'm a photographer and artist.
So my instinct is that Jarmusch really is kind of engaging with some discussions in philosophy. And these discussions about what can we imagine involve that if you try to imagine being some other creature, what would really make it difficult is if that other creature had different sensory capacities. And the standard example from a super famous paper from 1973 by Nagel is whether you can imagine what it is like to be a bat. So very vampire-like kind of example. And the thought here is that a bat has a completely different sensory system. And even if we can maybe imagine flying through the dark or a couple of other things, but it seems that there is a limit to the imagination if some creature has a different sensory capacity that we don't have. So my thought, and of course that is pure speculation, but my speculative thought is that Jarmusch wants to give these vampires some sensory capacities that we don't have, and that is, as it were, the limit of the imagination. So we can take their perspective, but we don't know what it would feel to touch, say, a guitar, and just by touching it, dating it. That is what Eve, I think, is able to do, that she touches stuff and she's able to say, well, that is 1905 or whatever.
Gibson. 1905.
And I think that is almost a quote, that is another cultural quote, that the question of being able to imagine different sensory capacities, that is, as it were, something that may put a limit to our imagination.
From the beginning, I thought it was for vampires, the blood is both food and sex. I think that's how it's portrayed in the beginning in these scenes when they drink from these nice little glasses and the effect this has on them. I mean, speaking about imagination, I read that paper that Katja is referring to. I mean, it's obviously a remarkable paper that pretty unmatched in that genre of philosophers writing about bats and vampires and so on and so forth.
Malignant demons who issue forth from their graves in the dead of night to attack their victims and drink the blood from their veins. Brrr.
Nagel is hesitant, as Katja said, about how far a human being can imagine being a bat. And he's not very optimistic about it for the reasons that Katja just mentioned. What I find fascinating about this switch that this movie makes in comparison, I think, to, at least as far as I know, vampire movies, and I don't know many, but the switch of perspective to the vampire, not the humans and the scared humans, but the vampire. I think one reason why it works so excellently well is that you take a step back and you imagine how the daily life of the vampire would be. Not just the feeding. The vampire appears on screen, feeds on a victim, and is gone again. No, here's the daily life of the vampire. The only other vampire movie I recall where this figures just very briefly is a movie from 2000, I believe, with John Malkovich and William Dafoe, Shadow of the Vampire. And there's this delicious short scene where the vampire Shrek talks about how boring it is.
The loneliest part of the book comes when the man accidentally sees Dracula setting his table.
It's just boring. It's such a drag to get on with life. And this movie by Jarmusch, I think, expands on that greatly.